Welcome. My name's Trisha Hirschberger.
I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell.
And we are coming to you live from Newegg Studios in Southern California. This is Newegg Now.
Yeah, back for another episode here to talk about tech and PC building and hardware and deals. Deals so good, the clock is already ticking on them. We're going to be revealing them throughout the show.
Yep, that's right. So make sure that you're watching along on Newegg.com/NeweggNow to follow the deals live as they're rolled out all throughout the show.
And we've got some really fun stuff lined up for today's show. First, we're going to be joined by JJ. I mean, he's actually sitting right there. We're talking about him as if he's not here yet, but the camera's not on him. He's there, I assure you. He exists. We're going to be talking about the new limited edition Assassin's Creed Origin GTX 1080 Ti card.
It's so pretty.
Trisha and I have been drooling over this. You've probably seen us molesting this card on social media.
On the socials.
It's good times. And then JJ's going to show off a special Mini-ITX console crusher build that he's put together. I'm really excited to talk about that, see the different perspectives on DIY PC building and how a small form factor PC stacks up against that console competition. And
then after that, we'll be joined by a special guest to talk about the biggest tech and gaming stories of 2017. So we'll be talking Intel 8th Gen, we're talking Threadripper, we're talking loot crates, everyone's favorite subject. Then last but not least, we're going to reveal our Newegg Now PC Game of the Year. Will it be PUBG, Shadow of War, Cuphead? You'll have to stay tuned to find out.
Definitely. So all the deals all show long. You can save money with Newegg Now. That's the whole idea, why we're here. And we'll be right back with JJ from ASUS, the Assassin's Creed Origins 1080 Ti, and that console crusher PC build. Don't miss it.
Welcome back to Newegg Now. We are talking PC building, console versus PC, and so much more today. Let's not waste any more time. Welcome to our first ever returning guest on Newegg Now, JJ from ASUS. JJ, for people who did not see the previous episode that you were on, what's your role at ASUS?
I do quite a bit of different things, but technically my role is technical product marketing manager. At the end of the day, pretty much what I do is just work with the community. I do a lot of outward-facing engagement, talk about all the great stuff that we're doing in terms of products, and get feedback and hopefully bring that back to be able to continue making awesome PC-centric gaming hardware.
Well, you do a great job. So we have a few things that we want to talk to you about today, including this build that we have right here. But before we dive into detail with that, let's talk about the ASUS Assassin's Creed Origins GTX 1080 Ti GPU. We have some footage that we shot of it, so let's roll that so that people can see the fine details. And now, for those of you that don't know, Assassin's Creed Origins takes place in ancient Egypt, and that's where the design on this card comes from. JJ, what can you tell us about this gorgeous card?
So, I mean, first and foremost, right, it's a GTX 1080 Ti, so it's pretty much a flagship level graphics card. When you're talking about that ultra high refresh rate gaming, multi-monitor setups, right, G-Sync, 4K, this is the type of card that you're looking at. And really what our goal was is to be able to kind of take the pre-existing Strix GTX 1080 Ti, which was already a monster in terms of its performance, the features and functions, and then just kind of elevate it and add something really special. And so that's what we did. We worked with Ubisoft. We were able to co-work with their ID team. We incorporated that into our design. And so we've got that really cool hieroglyphic imprints that are based here on the back of the card in terms of the
I thought that was a great
design.
consideration too, especially the way that it looks like it's carved into that back plate.
Yeah, so it's an imprint finish on there. I think it's subtle, but you can clearly kind of get that vibe from it if you're familiar with the ethos of Assassin's Creed Origins. Right, you've got a bit more of that kind of copper tone that's based on there, but really still at its core, right, this is a card that's built for gaming, not just, of course, Assassin's Creed Origins, but of course any game you want to be able to throw it in. And it fits our mantra of really being about cooler, quieter, and faster. That's really what we're always trying to do with ASUS series graphics cards, and this card definitely meets that marker.
And so this is limited edition. There's only going to be 500 of these.
500 of them globally produced. So compared to our normal Strix graphics card, which is in normal availability, you can go to Newegg right now and pick it up. This card is going to be a limited edition production run. So it comes in a specialized box. It's got a cool little gold leaf insert in there.
We were having fun even just unboxing it for the video we shot. It was pretty crazy.
And then of course you get that limited edition design. And on top of that, the cool part is not only do you get the game, but there's a limited edition promo deal right now that we've worked out with NVIDIA. So you also get Destiny 2 for a period of time. Okay. So it's a pretty awesome value when you consider it's $50 on top of what you would normally pay for our GTX Strix 1080 Ti. But you're going to essentially get this limited edition aesthetic design, and then on top of that, you're going to get the 2 additional games.
An Egyptian-themed case, like you can still have it fit.
Yeah, so that's one of the cool things. I mean, I'd say that the copper tones are a little bit kind of subdued, so they're not super bold. So this card does still feature the 3 zones of lighting. So you've got zones of lighting up here in the front. This is great for chassis that have vertical design for graphics cards. So instead of traditionally like we've got our graphics card right here, you might actually have your graphics card positioned in this fashion. So this is really nice because you can control the lighting there. Of course, if it's side profile, you're going to be able to control the lighting on the side. And if you see the top of the card, this is also customizable lighting. So you have 3 zones.
Awesome.
But what this card also offers that's unique, just like our standard GTX 1080 Ti, and was an industry first, is that we integrated actually an RGB header built onto the graphics card. So I think, Juan, you've got an actually RGB LED strip.
I hit the strip right there.
So there's quite a number of gamers when they go about building a system, right? If you're building with a modern ASUS board, you're already going to have RGB lighting and headers built onto the motherboard. But a lot of gamers, they might be building a system, upgrading a system from maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So there was no integrated quote-unquote RGB lighting, but maybe they want to be able to kind of up the vibe, right, of their system. This is a really easy way because once they pop the graphics card in, they can immediately go ahead and connect an RGB LED strip and then synchronize that with the lighting on the card. So it's a nice way of not only just getting that performance upgrade, but you're going to get an aesthetic upgrade. It's also got 2 fan headers that are built on here, which are great because we can see kind of like in this system right here, almost all chassis, they use 2 usually front intake fans. If you want to simplify things and be able to make sure that the card is responding to these fans' temperatures, you can plug them directly into the graphics cards. And instead of having those fans respond to like your CPU temperature, which tends to be much cooler than your graphics card, they'll actually respond directly to the graphics card temperature.
Awesome.
So just kind of some of those really, really cool special features and functions that we build in that kind of show you it's not just about it being a specialized Assassin's Creed card in terms of the design, but there's a lot of features and functionality go in there. And from that kind of cooler, quieter, and faster mantra, one of the things that also I think is very apparent is just the sheer size of this card. You can see that it's a huge monster heatsink. This actually is pretty cool because it's another industry first here. We've got something called our max contact design. So if you guys are familiar with the term called lapping, a lot of enthusiasts, what they used to do is they would actually lap, or they would really grind down essentially the base plate of some type of contact material for their heatsink to get it really, really smooth so that they could get really great temperature performance. Well, we did that in our factory, and actually we did that directly on here. So you're going to get super cool performance when it comes to the graphics card, and that also ties into the overclock capabilities here, which whether you want to use one-touch options or you want to do it manually, you're going to get a really fast card. It's going to be awesome.
Right on.
Very cool. And right now, for those of you at home, please know that Newegg is the only place that you can buy one of these.
That's right.
Supplies are incredibly limited. Like we said, there's only 500 of them.
500 in the world, yeah.
Yeah. And again, right now, Newegg is the only place that you can get it. So if you're interested, please head to newegg.com/Newegg now to place your order right away before they sell out.
Okay, and so I want to jump into this box right here, the build that you put together. This is, it's not a small form factor, but it's a smaller machine that we're sort of calling the console crusher. You built this with a target in mind, I feel.
Yeah, so I think part of the conversation that we had here was trying to approach, what's it look like if we try to build a system that's generally a smaller form factor inside. So this is a Mini-ITX based system that was kind of with that goal of really having high performance kind of placement for gaming, but maybe kind of in a more of an environment that might be in a living room type of environment. So that's what we ultimately settled on here. Now, of course, we're going to talk about this a lot more, but there's a lot of choices, of course, when you go into PC building. Whether you talk about the form factor, the performance, and the configurations, and definitely the budget that goes into it. But here, we're definitely at the higher end of the spectrum. We wanted something that could easily really be able to max out every type of game experience, be able to jump in and be able to offer VR capabilities, and even for some of the latest games that are now phasing in HDR support and things along those lines, we wanted this to kind of be really representative of giving you a great PC-centric gaming experience.
Okay, now give us the full build breakdown. What is in this system?
Yeah, so you know, a chassis always kind of defines the initial look of a system.
Right.
So here we went with NZXT's Manta. This is actually their matte black edition, so everything on the chassis is entirely matte black. It does actually have a window, but we didn't put it on there. The motherboard is utilizing our ASUS Z370-i gaming. So this is pretty much kind of the benchmark when it comes to a high performance, very, very feature-rich Mini-ITX centric based motherboard. Of course, we're using the latest generation CPU from Intel. So we've got the Coffee Lake in there, 8th gen. This is the 8700K. Cooling, we've got Cooler Master's latest generation ML series, which features actually ASUS Aura syncing capability. So it can synchronize lighting with our motherboard, the DRAM, all that great stuff there. So that's a closed loop water cooling solution. Graphics card here, we've got the baby brother to the GTX 1080 Ti in the GTX 1080, but still our Strix series, so still got a lot of those great features that we talked about. And then, of course, really for this type of system, you want super fast, responsive experience, whether it's booting into your operating system, loading your games, applying patches, all these different types of things. So storage-wise, we've got a couple of different storage configurations from Western Digital in here. One, we've got an actual M.2 based drive that's in there. So that's there's two models. There's their black and their blue series. And then we have a traditional blue series for traditional SATA-based connection that's running in there. And overall, that pretty much gives you most of the key items that we've got here. Of course, you could easily build out more than that, but that gives us kind of the corner of our system, except for the last item, which is, of course, our memory. And here we've got a Team Group's Delta R RGB memory.
Awesome.
Nice.
So let's talk pricing for a hot second.
Yeah.
A build like this, if you want real performance in a small package, you're going to end up paying more than you would, say, for an Xbox One. So how much would a Mini-ITX build like this typically run?
You know, it's really hard. You know, I mean, I work a lot of times with people in the community when it comes out to give me kind of like a part list configuration for a system. And it's really easy to float costs on a lot of different things. If I say usually the way that I would phrase this kind of build cost would be a GTX 1080 and the CPU. Everything else can be really brought down quite a bit. And what I mean by that is, you know, you could spend, let's say, $150 on a chassis, but you could easily spend actually $50 on a chassis. If you want to buy RGB fans, an RGB fan alone could cost you $25. If I want to put 6 of them in there, it's big. This chassis is actually already great. It already comes with 2 fans. They work great. And they're reliable. There's no problems. So what I mean by that is that you have to kind of factor in that pricing. But I would say for kind of a GTX 1080 class system, you're probably going to be looking at about $800 is about your minimum price band, I'd say, generally. But you know, for this build, of course, you're a little bit higher because we've put in a little bit more premium componentry. But it really varies, and I think that's one of the really interesting things that you have, though, with the PC.
A lot of people are going to look at that, though, look at that price point, say that $800 price tier, and then instantly compare that box against the console.
Sure.
And so, what are some of the advantages that higher price tag is going to bring? Like, I don't know that someone's necessarily going to be overly, you know, impressed. Well, I got 5 frames more per second when I'm 4K gaming. Well, I think this one setup or something like that.
So I think that's actually a perfect example. For one, you are not, even right now with the Xbox One X, right? It's a $500 console, and while Microsoft does tout the ability to have some games be able to play at 4K, they'll openly tell you not every game is going to render actually at 4K.
They don't have the elements for all of them.
Yeah, exactly. And even the ones that can, you're not talking about a sustained high frame rate experience. A perfect example is if you talk about Destiny. Destiny right now is already pushing the Xbox One X to its maximum level of performance. And when you compare that to, let's say, something on the PC side, you can play that at 60 frames a second, and Destiny 2 is entirely a much better experience at 60 frames a second, 1080p. So I think that's the big difference you fundamentally have is, one, you have control over performance, right? You don't have that under a console. If you play actually a console game, regardless of whether it's been well optimized or not, I can't really decide if I wanted to play faster or if I wanted to look better, right? If I'm playing something like The Witcher versus I'm playing a first-person shooter, maybe I'm willing to drop down in frame rate to be able to take an uptick in image quality. I can do that when I'm playing a PC game because I can go in and adjust my settings. You can make that choice, right? You also have the ability to scale, right? At the end of the day, well, there's improvements that occur over the life cycle of a console, right? I mean, definitely, you know, year 3 generally shows you games that are even performing better and look better than year 1, right? But here, in a lot of ways, the X1 X is going to be somewhat already mature because it's based still off of some degree.
Yeah, the pie's pretty much been baked.
Pre-existing improvements, right, that they've made in the hardware. On the PC side, right, you've got continual patching, and you've also got the ability to easily port in a graphics card. Now, you could legitimately build a actual console competitive replacement at about $500 to about $550. But the big difference is, of course, that in a year and a half time, if I save enough money, I could drop in a $150 graphics card, and I would be able to have better performance than the console would, with more flexibility, right? I would be able to jump into higher resolutions. Plus, it's still a PC at the end of the day. When I'm not gaming, I can do everything that I enjoy doing on my PC, whether that's watching YouTube videos, checking things out online, looking at photos, you know, streaming on Twitch or YouTube, right? A lot of these things, some of these elements are kind of there on the console, but are they really in that same type of class of experience? No. And so that's, I think, really the richness of the experience that you have. Plus, you know, I mean, for somebody that's been doing it for so long, I think there's the pride and the fun in being able to put together something yourself and define the look and feel. I think the Xbox One X and a PS4 Pro look kind of cool, but compared to a system that I can make look just about any way that I want, that's really different, and that's really cool.
I think those are great selling points that you bring up, because when you talk about building a mini PC that can compete with consoles, everyone looks at price point first, not thinking about the overall life with the upgradability, not thinking about potentially the hundreds of games you already have in your Steam library, and then you're not purchasing AAA titles on top of that with a brand new console. And all of that really does add to cost, so that's a huge point to bring
That was
up.
the big problem for me, PS3 to PS4, were all of the games that I had downloaded on my PS3 that, like, I can't just play them on my PS.
Inherent
PlayStation account.
I mean, there's no PC gamer that really goes kind of, I can't still play my old games, right? And that's a huge difference, is that fundamentally you have a massive archive. And when you also talk about the entry barrier, we talk about some of the world's most popular games right now, they're free to play. And they're quality, good quality gaming experiences, right? There are people that are out there playing Dota. There are people out there that are playing, you know, League of Legends, right? These are, they don't cost you anything to play. You can build your system and immediately start playing fun, enjoyable games at no cost to you. This doesn't really exist on the console, right? And when you also talk about the cost to entry, sure, you kind of got used games and kind of sometimes things like that. But if you talk about PC, you can jump in, like you said, to Steam, and you can see games that are literally from like $5, right, to, of course, AAA games. But there's a huge amount of content out there at variable pricing that really can fit with, I think, any gamer's budget.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I feel like people dip their toe into the water with a Steam machine thing, but this takes that to the next level, because you can really customize it and put whatever OS you want on it. So this is a gorgeous system, but I know one thing that you are passionate about is the flexibility that comes with DIY PC building. So this is one example of a DIY perspective that someone might build from, packing performance into a tiny package. But of course, PC builders do have other options if they want to go big or go home. Like someone could build a monster system, say, that leaves consoles far behind if price and space were not as much of an obstacle. And what might something like that look like, JJ?
So that's a really interesting question, because I think we've already achieved that here. Already a GTX 1080 can legitimately play at 2560 and even some 4K levels. That's not possible legitimately on what you're talking about with an Xbox One. So we've already left the performance barrier, right? Plus we add VR into the mix, and we have multi-monitor configurations. And we've got, like I said, easy ability is that with this system alone, next year, there's going to be a faster GPU. We could just swap out the GPU. Performance in terms of storage, flexibility. This board's got dual M.2, so right here on this one, we've got, of course, the Western Digital Blue right here, but actually on the back, it's got another M.2 slot on there. If I wanted to add in more, I could do that. And size plays into this. This is interesting. If you think, you look at the average height right now on a console, it's about approximately 13 inches. This is a little bit more, this is about 15 inches. But I can get chassis that will still allow me to actually have a fairly long graphics card. So this graphics card, even with our Strix card, down to about 9 to 10 inches. That means vertically, I can have my height even be lower than a console. It'll be a little bit longer, still to support the graphics card, right? But that could still be significantly faster and more capable than you would have with a console. When you get bigger, I think bigger is really about aesthetics. So of course, if we increase this size, I think it's about going into do stuff that becomes really interesting. I'm gonna have custom RGB lighting. Maybe I want full transparent tempered glass, right? Maybe I wanna go into dual graphics card configurations, right? I think all those type of variables are things you can definitely throw into it. But keep in mind also, you can port stuff over. Maybe you want to start off small from a budgetary reason, or maybe even for a look. Maybe you start off in an apartment, maybe 2-3 years later, you finally move into your first place, you got more room. Maybe you want to have a wall-mounted desktop PC, right? And you want to have something really cool. You could just take out your guts, put that into a new chassis, throw it on your wall, and bam, you're good to go. So I think that's the really exciting part. We're in a current state with PC DIY that the hardware isn't really limited anymore by form factor or by size. So you could easily really, I mean, I think we did a really high-end build here about like 6 months ago, and a very similar chassis where I think we spent like about like $3,000 in a Mini-ITX footprint. So you could totally balloon up this cost quite a bit. While still keeping everything very small. But at the same time, you know, yes, I've built $10,000 systems when I want to go into custom water cooling. So that is the cool part, is that really it's as deep as you want to go. It just depends on really what's your pursuit of your performance, what's the aesthetics that you want, and how much time do you want to be able to put into something.
Totally.
Right on. And so we know that a lot of you folks out there, you're excited about the PC building, you're DIYers yourselves. So now I think it's time to share some Newegg Now deals.
Indeed.
Starting off, of course, with ASUS, since JJ's sitting right next to me. We previously mentioned right now, Newegg is the only place to get one of these Assassin's Creed GPUs. So you'll want to place that order if you're interested in one. You're going to want to move on that pretty quick. Currently priced at $859. Quantities are extremely limited. And so, of course, you'll not only get Assassin's Creed Origins right now, they've worked out that special deal. You'll also get Destiny 2 right now
as
on
a part
that
of a different promotion.
It's a different promotion, but you're getting both, so that's what's good for you guys.
Yeah, of course. And we also have a couple of ASUS motherboards on sale today on special for Newegg Now prices. First, there's the ASUS Prime Z370 board, and that's $45 off today with the Newegg Now promo code. There's also the ASUS Prime X299A motherboard. That's for 7th gen Intel processors, and you can save a total of $130 off the normal price on that board, so that's huge. These are Prime boards, so they come with auto-tuning and Fan Expert 4 for overclocking, ASUS Aura Sync RGB lighting. You can watch our previous episode with JJ if you want more information about ASUS motherboards.
Yes, I was making sure you got all that was all accurate.
How did I do? Did I catch them all?
You did great, yeah.
Thank
so
you,
you got all the points. Because we've got notes on a screen right there. But we've also got the ASUS ROG GeForce GTX 1080 Strix graphics card for a very special price today. If you're looking to upgrade to a new graphics card, you can save $30 off this card with the promo code on the Newegg Now page. Plus, there's a $20 mail-in rebate. So that's $50 in savings on a GTX 1080, and you'll get Destiny 2 for free as part of NVIDIA's ongoing promotion.
Awesome.
So those will probably go fast. Again, now that I've already said the deal out loud, there's probably already been significant traffic on that. So go to newegg.com/Newegg now and check out all of the savings.
All right, so you need a CPU for your build. Why not go with an 8th gen Intel processor at a special price? As part of Newegg Now, through the end of today only, you can score an 8th gen Intel Core i5-8600K CPU for $50 off the normal price with the Newegg Now promo code. The CPU is fantastic for gaming, for VR. It's unlocked and ready for overclocking, so take advantage of this discount before it's gone.
And how about saving some money on storage? We were talking about Western Digital. We have discounts on 2 different SSD form factors from Western Digital today. You can save $35 off the 500 gigabyte Western Digital Blue SSD. This is one of the most popular drives around putting together a new system. Sequential read speeds up to 560 megabytes per second, and sequential write speeds up to 530 megabytes per second. Western Digital's 3D NAND technology, 1.7 million hours mean time to failure, that MTTF, up to 500 terabytes written lifespan. You can guard your data for years. You say data or data?
I say data.
I say data unless I'm talking about Star Trek, and then it's Commander Data, and that's why they're different. So that's a
I get it.
story.
I get it. I get where you're
going. That's
how
I've divided that line in my head. But you don't care about that. You care about the Western Digital Black 512 gigabyte M.2 SSD.
On with the deal.
On with the deals. This is also perfect for small form factor builds like the one that we were discussing here, off to my right. Sequential read speeds up to 2,050 megabytes per second. Who could think at that speed? Keeps your rig cool during intense gaming with optimized thermal and power management. Again, 1.75 million hours mean time to failure, 5-year limited warranty. The 512 gig WD Black PCIe SSD, that's a lot of letters, is $27 off the normal price through the end of today only as a part of Newegg Now.
And we do have even more deals on the Newegg Now page than what we're mentioning, so make sure you head over to newegg.com/newegg-now and check them all out there, get the full details and promo codes, and everything you need to save money. Beyond what we've already talked about, we've got monitors, keyboards, laptops, and more, so please don't miss out. Start shopping, stay tuned while you do, because coming up, we're going to be talking about the biggest and hottest topics in tech and gaming in 2017. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Newegg Now. We're in the home stretch here for 2017.
Indeed.
No major game releases on the horizon.
Not for the rest of the year,
we're all playing the games that have been released. And, you know, the big tech news is going to be coming CES in early January. So now's the time to look back at the year that was, the biggest hardware and gaming stories, the controversies, the highs, the lows.
JJ from ASUS is sticking around to help us recap 2017, and we're also joined by Nick from the Newegg Studios team. Nick, tell the people at home what you do here at Newegg.
Yeah, I work here in Newegg Studios, so I'm here every day. I work as part of the editorial team, and so I work on our site Game Crate, on Unlocked, on the Newegg blog, and for shows like this at Newegg Studios.
Yeah, when we talk about like the Newegg ninjas, Nick is one of the main people we're throwing problems. Nick, fix it!
Help us, Nick! Yeah, so Nick, seriously, thank you for coming on the show today to join this discussion. So let's go ahead and roll into our first topic. 2017 was the year consoles took a step forward in terms of performance and power, first with the PS4 Pro and then with the Xbox One X. Of course, we saw that console crusher PC earlier,
Very nice.
but the existence of these new, most powerful consoles ever, it's a big deal. So what does everybody think of the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X?
Yeah, like my big thing with these things, and JJ was saying some stuff right along these lines earlier, but I've always been kind of skeptical when they announced the Xbox One X. Oh, it's very, very powerful. But my concern was, what is the market for people who really want a game at the highest possible graphical settings and care about things like 4K and refresh rates and everything else that aren't already PC gamers?
Right, those are your PC gamers.
Right? That, like, what is the market? And I think you've kind of seen it in the sales of the Xbox One X. It hasn't been amazing. It's been okay, but it hasn't been amazing. Because it is like, you're looking for people who can spend $500 on a console, but aren't already PC gamers, but they do care about that very high performance. I mean, I think it is good in terms of just, it's always good when we're pushing the performance barrier higher in general, especially when you're porting over to consoles, right? There's always that worry that, a game's going to be held down because of the console level. It's not going to go as high as it could on PC, right, visually. So it's nice from that perspective, but I don't know, it's not something that personally has appealed to me. I have my PC for the highest level gaming, and then I have a console, I have a PlayStation 4, but for a living room kind of gaming situation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Do you feel like there's maybe some kind of consumer concern at play? You were saying, you know, like Xbox One X sales are good, but it's not like it's lighting the world on fire right now. Where the console was sold as sort of a gaming convenience, the living room easy computer to set up, and I feel like we're setting up a trend of, you know, maybe I'm going to wait and skip a couple console generations because they're stacking closer and closer together with these advances in things like VR. I need a more powerful console that didn't used to be something that consumers had to worry about. I mean, look at the Xbox 360 generation and how long, but I mean, genuinely, how long that existed as a great, convenient, easy gaming solution. Now I would be worried, I'm going to throw $500 at this box in 2 years. Am I going to have to do that again? Is my entertainment money for my family going to be better spent on like a general consumption device, like an iPad or a tablet or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question, but I think at the same time, each one of these categories is ultimately defining their place based on kind of a certain type of usage experience, right? While mobile gaming is a legitimate industry, right, when you talk about things like your phones or your tablets, they're not generally seen in the same space as they are in terms of consoles or in terms of PCs. And I think also kind of the elephant in the room to some degree on the PC side is the largest amount of volume in terms of what gets sold, even for, let's say, a company like ASUS, is you talk about gaming notebooks. Gaming notebooks have now hit very, very aggressive price points. You actually see that there's a huge amount of people that are playing very esports-centric titles, mobile-based titles, and you can buy a notebook that's capable of doing that for about the same exact price as what you would pay for a console.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting shift as well. This isn't something that historically had always been the case, that I could go out and buy literally a complete computer, right? And be able to play that, and now that's an option. So I think the PC DIY narrative of what we're seeing is that PC DIY is continuing to evolve forward as really the bastion of pushing the industry to its absolute limits, because the platform is inherently open, right? Is designed to be able to be modular, allow you to put in, if there's new graphics advancements, there's going to be a new graphics card. If there's a new processor, you can put in a new processor. Even things like monitor technologies. This year, we saw 240 hertz monitors. Next year, we're going to see lower refresh rates, possibly sub 1 milliseconds. We're going to see formalized HDR. We're going to see ultra high resolution. These things, they move at such a fast speed that really only the PC platform can move with that same type of progression. And so I think that that's not going to change. When you talk about a fixed platform like a console, it's always going to have to be able to work within that. But like Nick said, you get an uplift. I think the big benefit PC gamers can all agree with is the better that the console hardware is, that's beneficial for all PC gamers, because if there is going to be a porting of an engine, or it's going to be sharing kind of some code base, if it's faster, it's going to be better for the PC.
Yeah, and easier for developers too. So staying on the subject of consoles, Nintendo. Switch, huge hit this year, and several of the biggest and I think best reviewed games of the year, Nintendo titles. So do you think did the success of the Switch surprise you guys, and is this something that we think Nintendo can keep the pressure on? Like, you know, the Wii in its heyday was a license to print money for Nintendo, but we didn't see Nintendo have that staying power once the rest of the gaming industry sort of evolved out of that novelty.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think for me, I'd love to see actually Nintendo take the approach that kind of Sega's now taken. I think that they could have a much bigger, and we saw this, right? They're testing the waters, right, with Super Mario Run, right? On mobile, right? Which has actually been quite popular. I'd love to see them actually take their IP, because that's what I think people at the end of the day, the Switch has been enabled by some great hardware, and it's a great experience. But at the end of the day, what really made people want to jump into it is the games.
100%.
So
it's about the
I
games.
think for them, they should take, especially because Nintendo's predominantly known as a first-party company, not as a third-party company, right, when it comes to game development. So from that perspective, I'd love to see them, I think, even get bigger and actually start offering that to you know, PC. We're seeing things like that, like Sony's doing some more stuff like Final Fantasy. It's pushing more into PC-centric because they see that you know, the PC community is interested in it. So I think it's interesting. I think it's great that they're doing it. I think more games as a gamer, it's always great. You know, but I think that is in a direction I'd love to see Nintendo take.
Yeah. I think before the Switch came out, I think that was what a lot of people maybe were expecting Nintendo was going to do. There were articles, and you know, we had them on Game Crate and everything. Like, should Nintendo just go the Sega route and just, you know, they could do very well just with their IP, but after the Wii U just didn't catch on so much and had so many problems, it's like, well, maybe they're just not going to make consoles anymore. And I remember when they did reveal the Switch, I was very skeptical. I'm like, everybody has a phone. Like, mobile is not that big of a selling point for a console because you have your phone, right? But I think really the key, like you said already, is having Breath of the Wild, having Mario Odyssey, having these huge, really good games. Like, inarguably, some of the best games of the year were Nintendo games this year. Kind of a big surprise, I think, for a lot of people. And it would have done that regardless of what the console was in particular. Whatever console had those particular titles on it would have done well this year. And then, you know, there was a lot of other, you know, ARMS and Splatoon, and I think they were able to use the gimmicks of the console, because there's still like gimmicks in it. But they were able to use it in a way that worked better than it did with the Wii U. Like, there were so many functions of the Wii U gamepad that just, they had them in the first couple of months, and then no game ever touched them again or ever really explored them.
Well, because it was a tough call. You're asking developers to make singular novelty. I mean, I remember playing the demos on, what was it, one of the Arkham games, and you're like, yeah, the Wii U had some really awesome mechanics for that only would have been built into the Wii U version of that title. but that's not enough for me to want to buy a console, and very few other games really explored that kind of play. Are we afraid that Nintendo might be again relying on the novelty of the mobile and home gaming console experience when this is kind of cannibalizing their two markets? You know, like the success of like the 3DS is now, I think, feel like it might start to wane in light of Switch taking over as the preferred Nintendo mobility solution.
Yeah, I do think I maybe have not heard people talking about their 3DSs quite so much since the Switch has come out.
Definitely not. Yeah. But the Switch has knocked it so out of the park. I mean, I think as a PC gamer, it's easy to think, oh, of course we want the newest and the greatest and the most powerful put in there, but there is a whole market of people that's not necessarily what they go for. I was sharing one of my favorite tweets from the year with everyone earlier. AJ Jeffries at Moonjam tweeted out, Microsoft, Xbox One X has an 8-core processor and 12 gigabytes of Nintendo bursts in. You throw your hat on a frog and you're the frog. Crowd explodes. Hashtag E3. But that's so true.
Yeah.
I mean, there is something about the gaming experience that cannot just be boiled down to performance. Now, there certainly is that crowd that performance is the most important factor.
Oh, I can't believe the Switch only has a 720p screen.
But I think that performance is generally only driven by people that have been gamers for a long period of time. Even if we talk about PC gamers, again, at its core, the wide swath of the industry. A perfect example is graphics cards. The #1 selling volumetric graphics card is a GTX 1050 Ti. Okay, so that's very entry-level price point. We're talking about maybe a $100 to about $130 graphics card. The vast majority of people build system configurations are between about $750 to $800. So while maybe we're talking about really high-end configurations, it's actually only a very small percentage. But that's the beauty of the PC, is that the range is super, super, super big. But the depth of what people are really trying to experience isn't really limited that much by cost. I think the barrier still tends to be somewhat knowledge and time, right? There's always like, I'm a little bit afraid to do it, but when you generally talk to people that once they get the chance to do it, the hardware kind of fades away, really, because at the end of the day, they're playing on their PC because they're enjoying the experiences of the games that they're being able to play, right? They're enjoying the communities, the mods, right? You know, all these other elements that come into what the PC does really, really, really well. So I don't think it's also fair to kind of pigeonhole the PC and be like, it's always that people are pursuing it to be about the highest levels of performance.
Totally.
That's one part of the pie, but as a whole, I think most of the people just love the flexibility of the platform. And for us, I mean, that's also what we focus on designing. That's the reason why there's a lot of SKUs. It adds a complexity for people, but that's the reason why there's a lot of choices.
Well, speaking of complexity.
Yes, so continuing on the theme of increased marketplace competition, 2017 saw the release of both 8th gen Intel CPUs and AMD's Threadripper, which I know Juan's a big fan of. For the first time in recent memory, then, consumers saw real competition in the processor space. And that's definitely made it one of the biggest tech stories of 2017. So what do you guys think about the CPU battle in 2017?
You know, we're the largest motherboard manufacturer in the world. We were and have been a longtime AMD partner. We were absolutely ecstatic about supporting AMD on the high-end space to be able to offer a product offering. For us, at the end of the day, we just want to be able to give people choice. And so I think for people that are looking for the most choices possible, for us as a company that produces products, whether it's AMD-enabled graphics cards or AMD-enabled motherboards, Intel-enabled chipsets, NVIDIA-based graphics cards, whatever it be, our kind of perspective is that if we can provide to you that as an option, that's what we should be doing, and we want the experience for any one of those offerings to be outstanding. And it becomes challenging because we want to create a continuity and consistency to what we provide to them. But I think always, you know, choice is great. So I don't see any really negative to it. I think it's great that, you know, users have just more options as far as whether it's look, performance, feature set, price to performance, whatever it might be, whatever is their checkbox that they're looking for, it's helping to enable more of those choices.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that's, you know, anytime there is more competition in the marketplace, you know, the average person, the average consumer is probably going to benefit. With this particular battle, like, there's a lot of stuff, you know, like you were saying, the barrier to entry is also often knowledge. Like, which one is right for me? Should I just go for the cheaper one, right? If you really want to do your research and figure out what are your particular use cases, are you a gamer, are you a video editor, like what kind of price point are you trying to come in at? But just having more options now, more options than you might otherwise have. And in general, I think the online perception with anything, whether it's Intel or in any other marketplace, whenever there's one company that becomes the dominant force, I think you see it on Reddit and message boards and everything. There's people who are like waiting for it to, not necessarily to slip, but for there to be somebody else.
Oh, we always enjoy
like,
a good fall.
Yeah,
like we love building up a company and then watching and then tearing them right back down again.
Yeah, but it's like just giving them a little kick. Like, okay, you can't just stay where you're at, right? You have to keep pushing. You have to keep, if you want it, because there is this competitor. Right? That's a healthy marketplace is always going to have those different competitors.
Well, and in a lot of tech arenas, I mean, we're going to talk about smartphones and stuff too. I really felt like this year rewarded the consumer more than in recent years for investing a little time in that education, really finding the right product or the right fit for you. I kind of wanted to get your take, Nick, especially on the story like, we pit companies against each other. Like we always love this like David and Goliath battle when we talk about Intel and AMD. But this year also saw the rise of some really interesting partnerships between those two companies too. Do we think that maybe we're seeing the end of that, like Intel as angry juggernaut era with a company that understands, like we're seeing a vast diversification of tech and lifestyle and just different kind of consumer products that it doesn't really benefit them to be this solo player in this one CPU space, that they actually do need to leverage those kinds of strategic partnerships in other arenas.
Yeah, I think with the development of hardware and the fact that I think what a lot of people may not think about when they're thinking about processors is just how many things you deal with in your daily life have one of the big processor manufacturers as a part of them, whether your phone or your console or whatever it is, or so many more smart devices and everything else. Like these companies have technology so much more in the world, and the odds of someone's particular personal ecosystem just being on one kind of processor, that's not going to happen, right? People put together different things. So like we were talking about with smart home, the idea that different things can work together is going to give the user a better experience, and they're going to be happier overall. I think that's kind of, that would be beneficial to these big processor manufacturers as well, is rather than trying to like gate things off and, compete or like lock out the competition, is just look for ways that, we believe in our product and we're going to put our product out there and make it the best that it can be. But we also want to make sure that the entire marketplace and everything that would plug into this kind of technology is doing as well as it can. Right.
Well, and also just interesting because you were saying, I call it the personal area network, where I currently have, like, they're all muted and in airplane mode right now, but 5 different devices that are connecting and broadcasting different things. But even just in the chipset itself, there are technologies leveraged from multiple companies just to make the CPU. I mean, we're talking even just bolting on integrated graphics and things like that. It's not just this one thing.
Right.
It's now an ecosystem just on the block of the chipset too.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing though. I think because some consumers, it's very important to remember though that as much as open compliance within an industry helps to foster standards that people can work against, Intel's actually a very good example of this. They've defined a number of specifications. USB is actually co-developed by Intel, but it's an industry standard specification. At the same time though, you can look at many other examples that some of the best progression and the simplified experiences that consumers want are not actually created by open standards and open compliances. They're actually made by sealed ecosystems.
Totally.
Because they're companies that realize that I can give you a simplified, streamlined experience, and I also don't have to wait for others. I can essentially, if I want to dictate this progression of momentum, I can do that. You can see that in Apple. Apple's decided to leave Qualcomm to be able to create their own sensors for their processings and inside their cameras, inside their CPUs, right? That's actually a fully integrated ecosystem that they're leveraging. Samsung is similar in this approach, and so even us in our ASUS Aura initiative, right? While we later released an API that allowed a lot of partners to work with us and interface our hardware, we said we wanted to be able to define a fully integrated lighting experience before anybody else, and had we waited, right? We couldn't have been able to offer that for the community, even though we would have made it, because things have to happen. So actually, I think in reality, you actually need both. And I think actually the consumer wants both, because at the end of the day, the consumer can make the decision on what they will find will complement them best. It might be an ecosystem where it might actually be all filled by one company that's controlling the entirety of it, or it might be a propagation of multiple partners working together to be able to provide experience. So I think there's actually merits to both sides of these type of development processes.
Well, and speaking of closing off that ecosystem or having total control over it, one of the biggest stories of the year, the iPhone 10.
Yep.
I live a lot in the mobile space, so this one's right up my alley. And iPhone 10, I think, became sort of the standards bearer for this trend of mobile, especially smartphone prices, climbing higher and higher and higher. We're now talking about $1,000 smartphones. And just how much does that make sense, having such a premium, such an expensive device? I know we're making a lot of lifestyle arguments. People will pay it because they want to show that they've got the latest and greatest. It fits into their lifestyle or their sense of fashion, but with more competition coming to the U.S. space, we're seeing other companies like Huawei making a bigger play to hit North America. They're the world's third largest smartphone brand, probably going to stay there. Xiaomi, Oppo, these are their companies really marketing in India and Europe. What do you guys see for sort of mainstream mobile? Like, will we hit a price threshold, or can we always lobster pot the fashion brand? I mean, like, not to belittle someone who rocks a Louis Vuitton, but the function of that bag is not what is dictating the price of that bag. Can we do that with mobile?
I think that's a tricky slope because it's very difficult to understand what is important to a consumer when you buy into certain levels. So an example is, if you talk about like the highest level fashion companies, right? They generally use hand-based craftsmanship, right? They're using very, very small production teaks. They're using very high quality tanneries that go through special processes to source leather.
Well, yeah, but
these are things, but this happens actually in all type of product design. So an example is the GTX 1080 Ti. It's a very criticized part by the people that are only affording a $200 base graphics card. You could equally say, is there a place in the industry for a $1,000 graphics card? The Titan V has just come out. It's a $3,000 graphics card. You could equally apply the same exact argument to say, does it justify? I think as long as that there's a consumer that can find a usage scenario that complements their type of experience, then that product has a justifiable presence. It's then up to that vendor to justify, is the quantity that you produce it in something that is a market viable offering, right? So an example of that is if I have 100,000 gamers that are all playing on triple monitors with 4K resolutions, while that might seem to the vast majority of people a very small market and it doesn't make sense to make that one product, for those 100,000 people, they totally see the value in that product and they will agree that I should justify that expense, right? And so I think that's what we're entering. We're also, in your question on mobile, you have to look at that this is not the first year of mobile, right? You are now in a progressive culture. Most of the people that are probably buying the most premium smartphones, is this their first smartphone or is it their fourth? Right? So they've consistently now want to keep elevating the experience. I want even a better screen. I want better battery life. I want even more premium materials. So their acceptance of costs, it directly correlates to what they've already made an investment towards.
So do you think it's just going to get more and more expensive moving into 2018?
I do think that there will probably be some type of cutoff period, but it's not like there isn't already super, even things that are higher, right? I mean, there's phones like Virtuo, right?
Where no, they don't exist anymore. They folded.
there are, the concept, regardless of whether something folds or not, I mean, these all exist in any industry. And if you look actually at the industry as a whole, it's not about even offering less choice to the consumer. It's about even offering more choice, right? Cars are the perfect example of this. You're having more premium car companies than have ever existed in the history of the world, but at the same time, we're at the most aggressive price points that we've ever hit for cars in the history of the world. You can buy literally a no-frills basic car, $10,000, right? But can I also go out and buy a Bentley Bottega? Yeah. And the person that wants that car is a certain type of user and expects a certain type of expectation in that type of product. And so I think that that's something that we'll continue to see. Whether or not everybody is going to want that, right? There's always going to be that consistent propagation, right, of technology coming down in cost, being more marketable and things like that. I think the more interesting thing that we should really be looking at is that when you do really drive these highest end things, generally a good benefit to the normal consumer that people forget about is this stuff falls down, right? So right now, the best phones in the world have OLED, right? And I'm going to pay a big premium for it, right? But in another 3 years, right, a vast majority of them will have more of that, right? And so when you kind of adopt in the highest standards, in some ways that adoption also helps the more basic consumer over time because it's a testing ground for the vendors to be able to push things further that if there was no market for it, maybe it would have never been invested in the first place.
That's true.
Yeah, I think part of the sticker shock with the new iPhone partly is there was a perception for years, and like Juan, you're a mobile expert, so this maybe not the case for yourself, but for a lot of people, it's like, oh, do you have an iPhone or do you have an Android, right?
Right.
Like, and they really just meant two kinds of phones, and for a long time, it's like there's these two kinds of choices, and for one of the two choices that people tend to think about to cross that psychological barrier, and like north of $1,000 or whatever it would be, like I think that's part of why it was a big deal. But like JJ was saying, there are, and like you were saying earlier about the different phones, there are a lot of other choices on the marketplace.
Right.
And but I think that's part of the thing. It's like an iPhone now costs more than this, like more than X dollars, right? That was part of the thing. There's always been ultra premium, maybe niche phones that maybe have previously crossed barriers like that. But the fact that it was an iPhone doing it.
Yeah, this is a mass market product. This isn't supposed to be a niche player. And it's also creating that arms race where a company like Samsung really can't undercut Apple significantly in price because then their products are going to be viewed as being less than.
Less premium.
Yeah. And so now we're going to see, I mean, like the success of the iPhone X is going to create more of these conversations with all of the players to say, well, it doesn't really matter. I think Google is a great example of this, where when they had the Nexus phone, that was developer focused. It was also built on this notion of like Google heavily subsidizing the price of the phone to get people developing for Android, so you had this really aggressive low price point. There wasn't anything special about the first Pixel that made it significantly different than a Nexus phone.
It was just more expensive.
But they raised the price and they made it blue. So is this going to become the continuing end of this conversation? Because I mean, to your point, you can talk about things like OLEDs, but I can get an OLED in a $400 phone. I can get comparable performance in a $400 phone.
But that's where you want to throw that argument out there, but it's not accurate. A perfect example is in monitors, right? We produce monitors right now, and there's tons of there's a very important point to understand because it defines cost. A very premium quality panel that is carefully binned and sourced, right, can literally be the same exact panel, right? But if not binned, can have a 3x cost from that vendor. So you can have another company give you, quote unquote, the same exact thing, and it just hasn't gone through binning. And maybe it performs about 85%, right? But that other one performs to 95% of its specification.
Right.
And yes, you're right. Can I really see that 10%? Well, maybe for the person that is going to spend that extra money, that 10% difference is worth that 3x cost. But that is a fundamental difference that exists in a lot of these things. You can say that it's on there, but it's not the same exact thing.
That's totally true, but we look at something like the iPhone screen, it's binned, and we're still dealing with color shifting, and we're still dealing with the same problems that propagate on AMOLED displays regardless of the cost.
Sure.
So, the actual tangible benefit, because like I'm an audiophile, so I'll recommend a phone like an Axon 7 or an LG V30 because I have a desire to hear top tier audio, audiophile grade performance, and I can measure that. I can show you how much better that is than a Galaxy or an iPhone. But getting to that place where people can actually hear those differences requires an ecosystem of products to get around. So, I can scientifically show you that the iPhone OLED is binned, and so that is delivering some kind of scientific benefit. But the actual practical benefits, I can get that ultra high contrast ratio, that juicy saturation at $400. So is that really what I'm spending $1,000 towards for the overall experience of a phone that's more fragile than its predecessors, is more expensive to repair or replace, it has a higher cost of ownership over time, and doesn't significantly outperform its less expensive stablemates like the iPhone 7 and the iPhone 8. And this is the thing I'm concerned about when we talk about mobile, is we've lobster potted this up to a price tier that we can't back away from, and I see that escalating.
Well, the consumer has control. I mean, everybody can back away. I mean, I think it's ultimately, at the end of the day, the consumer has the choice to make the decision.
And then it becomes a question of education and advertising, and that also gets built into the cost of the phone.
Right, but you also can't limit it to just that one product in itself, right? Apple is more than just that iPhone. They are their services.
Their revenue is pretty much the iPhone.
No. their entire app ecosystem is tied directly into that, right? If they didn't go out and spend all the time on the development community to be able to create a great foundation in that respect, right? You wouldn't have the same adoption of that product. So inherently, you're paying for something that in some ways is almost intangible because it's not a specification within a product.
Right. It's the entire ecosystem.
This is the same thing that exists in many more other premium products, which us being like a premium vendor, right? It's a very complicated process that there's things that go into even, you pay for additional development and refinements. I'm sure you can also agree that there are certain companies that are progressive, right? Your investment in that company also helps to establish things that produce new innovations that wouldn't come about, that the lowest tier in the player is not interested in being an innovator. Right? The guy that's copying something, right, isn't interested in figuring out what's the next best thing that's going to really make people go, wow, I didn't know that this was going to be amazing. That's expensive. Innovation doesn't come free. Now, whether that an innovation is worth it, that's ultimately always up to the consumer. But I think, at the end of the day, it's an interesting time to allow for a lot of these choices to occur. And at the end of the day, the consumer is going to be the one that decides.
And speaking of innovation when it comes to mobile, and this is the last thing we'll say about mobile before we move on, but where do you see these super premium price point mobile phones going next?
That's a hard one.
Higher.
Higher, but for what?
Well, I think the interesting thing that we see is that mobile is reaching into an interesting space. Like on our perspective right now, when we worked with, take for instance, like on with Google and we did our first Tango phone, right? They released that. That's showing that there was a new contextual type of usability model that might exist, right? And so I think that's what actually you're going to see, is that I think that phones are going to continue to become more and more specialized. Right now, they tend to be kind of, they try to handle a lot of different things. And now, but you are seeing approaches to some companies trying to take a more specific approach to say, the phone maybe is a little bit better for this. And you're already getting people that sub-specify. If you want really great battery life, you don't buy this phone, you get this one. If I want a really great camera experience, I buy this. If I want a really great audio experience, I buy this. And are there people that want to try to have all of it? Yes. And that's the nature of the industry. But I think that that's what's going to continue to happen is as we look at really the industry partners that are leading this, whether you're talking about companies like Intel, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, the people that are enabling the technologies, enabling the displays, these type of products, we're going to see more and more refinement, whether it's more specialized gaming phones, camera phones, they're going to start to get more targeted. And I think with that, the prices will adjust accordingly based on what the intended usage is.
This was a really good year for specialist phones. So like BlackBerry made a really good play this year with the Key 1, just bringing back a keyboard. And that sounds so antiquated until you kind of use one again and you're like, there were things I really liked.
People liked it for a reason.
So and I think to that point, I don't think for 2018, but I would say by 2020, I think we'll start to see a concerted effort towards peeling pieces back off of the phone. So right now we're in this idea where you can focus on, I want a 3-day battery life phone. I want a phone with amazing cameras. I want a phone with phenomenal sound, and you can kind of focus in on that. But I think the notion of like heads-up displays for daily life and smart glasses and better audio experiences. Like already we move audio off of the phone because a lot of companies are getting rid of the headphone jack. So all of those things I think are going to kind of roll up together. But one of the things that's going to help move the industry on that is the investment in technologies like VR.
Like VR, yeah. Okay, so moving into VR, we've talked a lot this year about mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, whether it's the Oculus, the Vive, PSVR, Windows MR headsets. So this entire medium has grown exponentially in 2017, and maybe more importantly, the prices and the accessibility of this technology has come way down. It's hundreds of dollars cheaper to get on board with PCVR now than it was at the start of the year. So thoughts on VR, AR, and MR in 2017, and any predictions for 2018?
And how much super hot did you play? I mean, is it days of super hot or weeks of super hot?
I beat the campaign in a day, right? It's not that long, and then you do the endless modes. I really like the endless modes.
Those modes are great.
But yeah, I'll let JJ speak as far as the mixed reality headsets go. But I was an early adopter of the Vive. I bought it pre-ordered it at launch for my own personal use because I did try it at like an Intel event when it was still in pre-production and everything. And I tried it and I did the blue VR and I did everything. I was like, oh, okay, I have to have this. Like that. I think that's like we talk about killer apps for VR, but really it's trying it under the right circumstances will sell so many people. And it's not the right circumstances are not a Google Cardboard or something like that, right? Like phone-based. Even Samsung. I think Samsung Gear VR is a and equivalent things like Google's Daydream.
The Daydream, right.
They are better, obviously, than like a cardboard experience, and they can give you some sense of the power of it. But really, even with Oculus, when it wasn't really room scale, like now with the multiple things, you need room scale and you need touch controls, and you need to be able to interact with a digital world as if it's a real world, and that will sell you, right? It's not going to sell everybody, right? Obviously, VR has not. It's not maybe where some of the companies behind it would want it to be at this point, but it is continuing to grow. And you hear so many stories and you see so many stories online of people who, oh, my friend came over and they tried my VR and the next day they bought one, right? That's how this word of mouth selling.
Right.
And we have that problem when we're writing about it on Game Crate, is like trying to review a VR thing. It's like it's so hard to explain what it's like. It's so hard to get that sense across to people because it is such a different kind of experience.
Well, and in so many other technologies, I think it keeps falsely being sort of the equivalent of where we were with 3D TVs. You know, like we've been through other tech situations where there feels like there's a lot of astroturfing going on, but VR really does depend on that grassroots. Bottom-up kind of shared experience in a way that I don't know that we've had since like the early days of Nintendo.
Well, and a lot of gaming sharing now happens through live streams and pre-recorded videos, which again, sharing a VR or MR experience that way still has not been perfected.
Far from.
I think really what it comes down to is when we look at all the R's, right? The AR, the VR, right? The MR. It's about trying to figure out that we can't fit all of them through the lenses of a predefined expectation that exists for one. So take, for instance, VR. We generally use this to say VR has to meet the marker of being the absolute great experience that exists on the best PCs, right? That's how we generally review something as the Oculus or like the Vive, right? But something like mixed reality wasn't made for that intended purpose, right? And I think that's the fundamental thing, is that the industry and the people that kind of surround it, we haven't necessarily got to that yet. But the example would be like, if I'm just walking by my restaurant, right? My phone, is using the GPS to ping and then check the Foursquare to see how many people checked in. And all I see is just a little readout on something that shows me there's 20 people in there and there's a 5-minute wait, right? Visually an indicator that immediately shows up, right? That doesn't need to be in super high fidelity. If anything, it just needs to be just a little pop out on something, right? That pops up, whether it's in my glass or, maybe it's through some type of advanced display that's on a phone, right? So I think it's all about the usage scenario. Once we figure out the correct usage scenarios, the technology and the companies are going to help to mature them to the point so that the consumers find that this makes sense for me, right? And I think then that's going to take refinement, right? People are going to have to kind of try it out and feedback to people and let them know. I don't think it really needs to be for this type of experience, but I do think that it might work really well for this experience. And once we get that level of maturity, we're going to continue to see more and more improvement. So I definitely don't think, it's not like these things are going to disappear. For sure, I think they're only going to become more ingrained within our culture and how we experience them. But there will be, they need to get whittled down. Right now, I think it's a little bit too broad. Everybody says, well, everything's going to be in VR. It's not going to be everything's going to be in VR. It's just like movies are a great example of this. There are some movies that genuinely do actually well in 3D when the director consciously thinks about using it as a vehicle.
Absolutely.
And some of the best filmmakers talk about 3D like they talk about black and white. It's not about using it as a gimmick. I'm using it as a tool to convey part of my story.
Right.
So I'm going to use this because I feel that it allows me to create a narrative that I couldn't create without that technology, right? And I think that's the same thing that is going to be for any one of these R's, right? Is that they will see this is the compelling way to tell this narrative.
Yeah. I think I've interviewed a lot of VR developers, and they say very similar things. And we still are in the very early stages of learning how to tell a gameplay story in VR, right? And how to just ideas of, should there be things happening behind your head if you're not looking at them?
Right.
Like that
should it be all visible?
Right. That makes the world feel alive. That's how things work in the world. Things are happening not just where you're looking at them, but that can also be very strange. And horror in VR is a good example, because I'm a horror fan, but horror in VR is often just too intense. It crosses a line that makes it I like scary movies, but even on the Samsung Gear VR, there's something you're being wheeled in a wheelchair through a mental hospital, like a
Yeah,
spooky mental
I know
hospital.
exactly what you're talking
and you're just
about, that
looking
demo.
around, and there's a part where like crazy mental patients and doctors are surrounding you, basically like a ring around the rosy, and you can be in a rotating chair so you can spin around, and they're all just looking at you, and sometimes you'll turn around and one of their faces will be really close, and that had been going on behind your head, and you didn't know until you turned right there, and at that point, like, you tear the thing off, right? That level of power, I think, it's scary to some extent what you do with that, and we're going to figure it out over the next few years, because like violence in VR, horror in VR, these things are much more intense because our brain is fairly easy to trick in terms of thinking that this is real, right?
But we also we have a certain level that we need to get adapted to. Great examples like there's some people, if you show them like when they released The Hobbit on 60 frames a second, there's people that were jarred by it.
Frame rate,
Actually, you're getting closer to reality, right? And once you settled into it, you realize the fluidity and the great motion clarity of the battle experiences, right? But people that have been tuned to watching content at 24 frames a second for so long are not probably...
It looked different, so it looked wrong.
Because they're wired. There's nothing wrong with it. This is the same thing, is that it won't even be us. It'll be the people that are even younger than us that are more inherent with the technology running at higher resolutions, higher refresh rates, where they will become more adapted to that technology, right? As well as some of us that are willing to keep pushing ourselves to support essentially these progressions.
And that balance is really delicate too, because I think we've seen a number of companies don't really get rewarded for pushing too far too fast. Like, they're usually punished if they're taking too big a step into some of these areas. But I was even kind of surprised by some of the frustration and like outright anger I faced when I started shooting 360 video.
Oh, wow.
And so here, I mean, like, I would be trying to create like sort of a vlogging like experience where you could sit with me in like a place and we could have a conversation, and giving the viewer control over where they wanted to look actually created more frustration. You're like, what am I supposed to be looking at? What am I pointing the camera at? Yeah. I mean, like that actually became a frustration for a lot of people when the whole point, and I would say in the video, the point of this is I want you to sit with me at my favorite park and just enjoy 20 minutes of a sunny day while we have a conversation about something. And just like if you were sitting with me, you don't have to stare at my face perfectly framed in 16:9. I'm not that good looking. Look around. This is one of my favorite places to come and visit, and that actually made people angry.
Yeah, well, that's we're used to, like, when we're not playing a game, if we're just watching something, we're used to it being fairly passive. And now there's an extra task I have to worry about, is where I'm going to look, rather than you, the filmmaker or the content creator, just telling me where I'm supposed to look.
Right.
But like you said, these things are not going away. Like this technology is here to stay. It's not, it's not a flash in the pan. With all these big names like ASUS getting on board the mixed reality train, we have some out already, and then coming out in the new year. Hoping to hear more at CES about the ASUS.
Yeah, can you tell us anything about your headset now?
Not too many details,
awesome, right?
Not too many details, but like always, that we like to come up with some new hotness.
It looks cool. It looks cool from what I've seen.
Well, we're excited. All right, let's jump into one of the more controversial topics of the year: loot boxes in video games. 2017 saw both an explosion of loot boxes across the whole gaming spectrum, from mobile to AAA titles, and also a huge backlash against loot boxes, most infamously with the reaction to EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2. So let's talk about it. Are loot boxes always bad? Is there a way they can be done right? Juan obviously has very strong opinions on this, but some people feel if it's not pay to win, but you're paying for, say, something cosmetic that just adds to the game, then that's okay, especially if it's a free-to-play game to begin with. Thoughts?
I think you nailed it right there. I think it's a slippery slope between supplemental revenue or like microtransactions that exist within games, and then loot boxes. I think loot boxes have to be very clearly defined as to what supposedly is, and I think that probably the most contention, and I would agree with it, is that if it fundamentally changes an inherent art to how I play the game, I think that people want to know that. If that's going to be present in the game, I want to know that clear ahead of time to know that that impacts the overall type of experience that I'm going to have day in and day out, especially if you're talking about something that gets like an online component in terms of the game. And I think that's what people have not been satisfied with. You're telling them, I have to go into this, and you can inherently change the dynamic, or I don't know how it's going to work, and there's not any guarantees, and that's what I think what they're frustrated by, especially when there's already a fairly high cost already attached to the game.
Yes.
I think when you talk about things like supplemental transactions that might be, like you said, might be aesthetic things, like I'm just getting a different skin or a different character, or adding something like that, I think most people realize that hey, as long as that's not affecting my game experience, right, at its core, I'm fine if you guys want to add that in. And if I'm really passionate about the game or the lore or the world or whatever it might be, maybe I'll even do that, right? But otherwise, I don't need to partake in that once I've made my initial
My
investment.
bacon-wrapped gun doesn't really shoot better than...
Exactly. So I think that's really where it's at, you know, and I think that the broader part to this is also how much of this plays into, I guess, the maturity of a title when it's released, right? I mean, this same thing goes into a lot of the technology, even when you talk about price points, again, right? If we pay more for anything, I think the expectation that it works reliably, it works consistently, and works well is at a higher level, right? And so I think that if a game costs you a lot more, probably if a game is buggy and I spent like $5 on it, right? I'm like, okay, it's buggy. I only paid $5 and I don't care. You know, I think at the end of the day, there should probably be a bar regardless, right? That you should say that it should always meet a modern level of quality. But I think that's where it also gets to, is that people have been frustrated, like, okay, I spent $70 for it. Now you're affecting my gameplay experience. And on top of that, there was other issues that were in this game on top of that. So it's like, I'm hurting on 2 points, right? And I think that's, we're entering into these new territories with games kind of being a continual propagation of how they're evolving, not only from patching and balancing, but then also the loot crate mechanics.
Well, and updating a game isn't a new thing. I mean, we're of generations that we've been dealing with like expansion packs and DLC for a while now. Why do you think, Nick, that 2017 became such a contentious year for companies monetizing?
It was really like there was this simmering stuff, and you see it hanging out in the game community, and reading the message boards and seeing comment sections and looking on YouTube as well. There has been this simmering about loot crates for quite a while now, and I think it was just waiting for a particular game to explode, and the fact that it was
something that hit its pulse.
Right, the fact that it was a Star Wars game, it was Battlefront, right? It was EA, a company that people already have all these like feelings about online. The fact that, and really, like you were saying, what's a big issue is that it's a multiplayer game where you were able to get like mechanical bonuses by paying extra money in real life, and like, they danced around that a lot, but that's an issue. Like, people don't like feeling that because they're not as rich as someone else, that they can't even enjoy their game.
Oh yeah, pay to win is very frustrating, especially when it's something like a major character that can only be unlocked after so many loot boxes.
Well, and I think a perfect example to that point of what you're talking about there is look at, while there's been a lot of really big successful quote-unquote mobile games, right? So like on, let's say, like phones or tablets, the kind of retention that those games have is very poor, right? They tend to kind of really die off over a short period of time because people realize there's like this built-in paywall, right? But if you take a look at a lot of free-to-play games that are on the PC, the reason why they've been able to stay so long and so successful is the companies inherently have said, we want to make sure that the game experience at its core is consistent across anybody that tries to play it, and we're just supplementing it by allowing you to take upon more if you really invested in the game, from aesthetic characters or things along those lines. And I think that's a classic example of where people are comfortable in that wheelhouse, right? But once it starts to, again, really encroach on that, and I think as we move into more games that are also more multiplayer-centric, that's where also there's more of this contention. I think the really thing I'm more interested in is me being a single-player focus. I'm wondering is, do we get back to game developers saying, is it easier then for us to maybe spend more time making really great single-player campaigns, right, than the complexity that comes along with so much of the multiplayer, right?
Now, in contrast to some of the other systems that we've seen for additional monetization, and especially in microtransactions, one of the things that definitely seemed to be a sticking point for a lot of people this year was the discussion of whether or not this type of monetization scheme represents gambling. For example, we've got Chris Lee out of Hawaii drafting legislation
going
to start
real
examining that practice in gaming, and how maybe this is now one of the major differences. Like, so you were talking about mobile games. I was a big fan of Marvel Future Fight. So this was a rough year for Disney properties engaging in this sort of loot box style where it used to be like if I wanted a really powerful character that was behind a paywall, I knew how much real world money that was going to cost. And they introduced a new box where it was you had a randomized chance for parts of material to eventually unlock this guy at $50 a spin for a phone game. And then you start to tackle that with Battlefront, where it's not Darth Vader's locked behind a $20 wall. I could understand I pay $20, I get Darth Vader.
Well, because then it's the idea of DLC, which I think a lot of gamers are used to.
Right, then it's an expansion pack.
Right.
But now it's, I can pay for a randomized chance of some material that will eventually. So now, I mean, like I earlier in the year, I did a video with Dr. Timothy Fong at UCLA talking about smartphone addiction. And so now we're seeing these mechanics. I'm going to have to play the parent card here. Won't someone please think of the children?
Right.
But, you know, Star Wars is a family franchise. Marvel, they're family franchises. Do I really need, as a parent, to babysit every aspect of my kids' gamings to make sure that they're not being exposed to extreme dopamine-releasing mechanics like slot machines at the cost of real-world currency? Is this maybe where we draw the line? Because my big fear, just like with the movie industry and the music industry, is I don't want politicians involved in gaming, but politicians have to get involved in gaming if there's unlicensed gambling as a part of the core mechanic.
Yeah, that's the key. People throw that word gambling around a lot, and I think that's probably like a legal term mostly. Like you know, that might be something that the legal system needs to decide. But when you do, like when you're playing Overwatch, or one of my favorite games this year was Injustice 2. I'm not a big fighting game guy, but I really liked getting the different shaders, like customizing Swamp Thing and whatever. Like that's so insanely fun. And getting a new piece of gear in that does give you that, like you're saying, that dopamine rush. Like whatever it is, if you want to call it gambling or not, it's plugging into some of the same parts of our brain in that reward center of like, oh, I got something. Like it was a random thing and I got it.
Right.
And
Thank you, RNGesus. Thank you.
Yeah, I took pictures of it and shared it online. Like, look at what I got. It's so cool. So that is an extra layer, and it is like, we do need to be aware of how that's affecting, especially younger gamers, right?
Yeah.
I think, you know, I think at the end of the day, what probably most people really at their core want is transparency. I think at the end of the day, regardless if there's a charge that's associated with something, like most things like we talked about earlier.
Disclosure.
The free market will decide. But I think to be able to decide, I have to be able to be informed, right? And so I think that if the company wants to take the risk and say, hey, we think that we've got such compelling stuff that we'll put behind this amount, right, for you to be able to pay for it, I think that's fine.
And you can
within
make
a
that
company's
choice,
right to be able to make that choice if they think that they have something that's that great that you're willing to pay for. But I think that what most people just want is the transparency to know this is exactly what it is that I'm actually going to pay for, right? This is how much it will cost, right? And there's not a kind of a true variability or randomness, right, to it. I think as long as that's disclosed, I don't know that you necessarily need legislation. If the legislation is more about enabling transparency, right, than structuring actual mechanics within a game, I think that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, because isn't this the big fear, is do we really trust politicians? I mean, Chris Lee seems very well versed in the world of gaming, and it sounds like he's doing this whole YouTube campaign where he's actually showing you the steps involved in drafting a piece of legislation. I think it's a great exercise in citizenship, you know, like really showing the process. But do we trust politicians to understand that distinction at the same time, where we do still have some issues in the gaming ecosystem, parents buying games for kids, not really fully understanding everything that goes into that. Like, I can pull up an app on my phone and Google will tell me there are in-app purchases. That's not enough.
Right.
Is this like, is it, you know, I can turn off ads as an in-app purchase, or is this my kid can throw $50 at a slot machine spin to unlock Nova in Marvel Future Fight? That's a very different kind of in-app purchase.
It's not new though. I mean, you know, right now there's already like tons of box figure configurations, which are, you know, blind boxes, right? That people have been buying for a year, and collectors that have more disposable income seem to have no issue with it. They're literally throwing tons of money at trying to find the right blind box that has the right character that's exclusive to one thing, right? Because they deem it to be valuable, right? So these question marks as far as of how they actually work and where they're structured, I think they've already been existed. Again, I think this just gets back to your point where it hit a topical pulse and it happens to be a play here, but this isn't something that's necessarily unique to this situation, right? So I think at the end of the day, the easiest thing is, you know, is really just to make it clear, and, you know, we can ultimately decide whether we think it's worth it or not.
Yeah, just to have that transparency so that people feel like they're actually making an informed decision. And the key would be that transparency before the game is out, right? Like so people can know, am I going to buy this game? Not like day of, right? And then with you know, just to wrap up on this, but when we were reviewing the game, like the state of Battlefront when the review period was going on was different from what it had been planned a couple of weeks before, and then it was different from what it was at launch because they kept reacting to what it was. And that's very hard for a consumer to make an informed decision when you're changing fundamental reward systems in the game over and over again.
Yeah,
right? You just don't have that.
It seemed like most people just tapped out.
Yeah.
Yeah, like having conversations with people, like it stopped at that sort of initial ire, and then you would try and explain like what happened after that, and you'd see people's eyes just sort of glaze.
Yeah, they tapped out.
It's like, I just didn't buy the game, so now I don't care anymore.
Right.
Yep.
So I think we've all decided gaming should just be illegal.
No.
No more video games.
Everything except for gaming should be
things
illegal.
I don't like should just be banned.
Untrue. But guys, that was our discussion of 2017. Thank you so much for joining us. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. That was absolutely everything that happened all year. We didn't miss a single headline, I think.
No, and you know, you would probably be remiss to add to the conversation in the comments on any of these videos. Just be a waste of time.
Seriously, though, thank you so much, JJ and Nick, for helping us take a look back at the past 12 months and what's going on in the industry.
Yeah. So we're coming close to the end of the show, and we still haven't revealed our Newegg Now PC Game of the Year wardrobe malfunction.
Not full. Come on.
All right, that was great. So we're gonna recap some of today's deals real quick, and then get on with the show. From ASUS, you can get the get $45 off the Prime Z370A motherboard, $130 off the Prime X299A board, $50 off that GTX 1080 Strix graphics card with that mail-in rebate and the promo code. I would be shocked if there are very many of those left by this point in the show.
Yeah, we'll have to check after the show. You can jump into the 8th gen with $50 off the Intel Core i5-8600K unlocked overclock ready processor. Then upgrade your storage game with WD's Blue SSD for $35 off and their Black M.2 SSD for $27 off.
And don't forget that limited edition, gorgeous, beautiful, it was everything I could do to just not lick it while we were doing the photo.
Oh, don't do that. You'll be a meme forever.
I know, but I like that card. So only 500 of those will be made, and you can buy one now. So one more time, you can go to newegg.com/Newegg now for all the deals we've talked about today, and even more deals down at the bottom of the page. Okay,
now that we've wrapped that up, it is time for the Newegg Now PC Game of the Year. So we counted down the nominees a few episodes ago, but in case you missed it, they were Cuphead, PUBG, Destiny 2, Divinity Original Sin 2, and Middle-earth Shadow of War. And that's our team, the Newegg Now team, put together those nominees. And we got your opinions on them as well when we talked about it before. So let's go ahead and turn to our guests. What do you guys think was the best game on PC this year?
Divinity all the way. I mean, I might have picked something else differently, but I think that game is quintessentially PC at its core. And the work that Lorraine Studios did at listening to the community on developing the game is absolutely amazing. The depth, the world, the gameplay experience, it's an outstanding game.
And Nick, tell him why he's wrong.
Well, I think that's a good game. I like it. You know, it's always a personal choice, but I'm probably a large part of the reason that Middle-earth Shadow of War is on this list. I wrote our review for Game Crate. It's one of my favorite games of the year, absolutely. I think if you like that Assassin's Creed Arkham-style open-world combat game, it does it so well. I feel like it got unfairly tarnished with the whole loot box thing, because really, I don't think the loot boxes even make sense for you to do at all, because you just buy, you can spend real money if you want.
You're paying to surpass the Nemesis system, right?
Yeah, the Nemesis system is what's fun. It's what's good about the game, right? You get an orc. Why would you pay $1 for an orc that's just going to die in a funny way? Like, just play the game. Just the grind is fun, right? It's such a good game. Yeah.
So what was your favorite?
These are all good, but I think I would agree with JJ and say Divinity Original Sin 2. Honestly, I'm a big tabletop gamer, have been for years and years and years, and this is the closest experience I have ever gotten in a video game, and trust me, I've looked over the years. This is the closest to a tabletop RPG experience I've ever gotten in a video game. Plus, it's got local co-op, which I love. It's so detailed. I love it. It's really, really good.
So, I mean, like, my top game, I'm not even going to call it that I think it should have been on the list, like it wasn't on the list, was Evil Within. Just that atmosphere, again, a return to a really cool horror kind of concept and a gameplay style that I really like from you know, the atmosphere of Resident Evil games and Alien Isolation experiences like that. So I don't think it deserved like any
PC game of the year.
PC game of the year, but it was probably my favorite overall experience, just sitting down 2 a.m., family's gone to bed, all the lights are off. Got my killer headphones on so I can hear every little creepy crawly sound, and it's phenomenal.
Some people are gluttons for punishment. That's all I can say. But there can only be one winner. So on behalf of the entire Newegg Now team, here it goes. Our winner for the Newegg Now PC Game of the Year is Cuphead! Roll that footage.
Now this is the game that I probably played the most this year.
I spent so much time.
It was the family favorite at Thanksgiving. Like our entire family would play until they would rage quit by throwing the controller to someone else.
I'm impressed that you got your entire family to play. I feel like my entire family would play for a whopping 90 seconds and then say, "This game is too hard."
The photo of Thanksgiving was Grandpa and Lex, so 2-year-old with Grandpa holding controllers, watching Cuphead play. It was pretty epic.
So good, but I mean, there are many reasons why this game won. This game was years in the making, highly anticipated, such a unique and refreshing look and feel. Again, with that local co-op that's super fun, and it's got that old school platforming challenge, which for any of us that grew up having to memorize final boss patterns to beat the game, this is where it's at. So, yeah, we've talked a lot about Cuphead again and again through our previous Newegg Now episodes. It's fun, it's accessible, it's highly polished, and it's only $19.99 on Newegg for a code that works on both PC and Xbox One. Let's hear it for Play Anywhere. The best of both worlds, bringing PC and console together. What a nice message to wrap up 2017,
Some synergy and cohesion.
Yeah. We talked about all the scandal stuff, and now let's bring it together.
Bring gamers together.
My shout out, though, is to Hollow Knight. If they like Cuphead,
play Hollow
Knight. Is good.
$5 less, and it's got a real story to it. Hollow Knight.
Yeah. Also, What Remains of Edith Finch. There's tons of great ones
Good
this year.
Good year.
Yeah, good year.
It definitely was a good year. So that's going to do it for us here on Newegg Now. We're going to be taking a couple weeks off. You know, just getting some rest in, spending some time with the family.
Yeah, doing the holiday thing.
Doing the holidays, but keep your eyes on Newegg's YouTube and Facebook channels. We'll be releasing more videos, and of course, coming up, we're all getting prepped. We're doing our pre-pro right now for CES 2018.
Woohoo, CES! So thanks again to our partners from ASUS, Intel, and WD. Thank you so much to JJ and Nick for joining us, and thanks to all of you guys for watching. This has been Newegg Now, and now you know.